to be all the things to everybody else, because in doing that and pleasing them, you gather their approval, right? You then become enough by, the vehicle of their approval, by pleasing others, right? By being good, right? By doing all the things, taking on the extra tasks. And fundamental, as I've been building my business and just part of my own belief set, is that, this world needs abundant, visionary women who are empowered and in full belief of the truth of their abundance, right? And they're in full conviction of their wholeness and their enoughness, right? This is how we actually change the world. This is what allows us to go out to do our good work, to achieve those next levels of ourselves, and then correspondingly those next levels of impact with our businesses, with things that we do inside of our lives, right? We can be so much more powerful inside of our families, inside of our relationships, inside of our communities, when we are standing in our full worth, our wholeness, and our enoughness. And I use those words interchangeably, and we talk a lot about this inside of my Money Mastery Academy, because oftentimes when we are undervaluing our worth, or negotiating our worth, or not standing in our worth, it's because we don't feel like we're enough, or we somehow feel like we're broken and we're not whole. I'm here to remind you that there's nothing wrong with you. You are not broken. You are whole. You are enough, and you were born worthy. And so this is what this conversation is about. Achieve that next level, right, of yourself, and then correspondingly that next level of impact. And to create that most abundant, beautiful life that you're craving and desiring and wanting, it requires standing in your worth. So I want to, here's what we're going to do today. I want to talk to you about the top signs that you may still have some work to do for around your own self-worth, right? So we're going to go through the top 4 signs that maybe indicators for you that, oh, this is an area that I need to explore a little bit further. We're going to talk a little bit about where some of those lies of being unworthy actually come from. And then I want to talk to you a little bit as well about what I call the worth negotiation trap, right? When we start negotiating for our worth, and really what that's about, because this is the action piece. This is the piece that you can actually, this is the how, right? This is the how that if you make this shift and change these, couple things, then you no longer are negotiating for your worth. You can just stand inside of it. So let's dive right into it. Let's talk about 4 signs that you may be needing to look at your worth, right? Or that you may be, not standing in your full worth. And one of the things that I have some notes here. One of the things that I wrote down is that you try to be all things to all people, and you have 0 boundaries. Often when I talk about abundance walks, I talk about this using the language of, being everything for everybody and then leaving yourself for last, right? You're so generous with everybody else, and then you just leave yourself for last, right? You have 0 boundaries. And so this is totally natural to be doing if you're not embracing your wholeness and your enoughness, right? It's just sort of the way it is, right? Because you're not embracing all of that wholeness and enoughness of yourself. So you lack the clear boundaries. What it looks like is people pleasing, right? Trying to be all the things to everybody else, because in doing that and pleasing them, you gather their approval, right? You then become enough by, the vehicle of their approval, by pleasing others, right? By being good, right? By doing all the things, taking on the extra tasks. So one of the ways that I have seen this manifest just what this can really look like in real life, and you've probably done this, so you might see yourself inside of this example. And I definitely see it every day inside of my coaching practice, and just, with the women that I interact with inside of my community, is it might look like, you're trying to run a meeting, you're trying to do this thing, launch this program, offer your, work on your business, but then you're also like, sure, I'll carpool all the kids to this thing, and I'll make the gift basket for that, and I'd love to be the team mom for that sports thing, and sure, I'll take on that other volunteer activity, right? It manifests itself like that because we don't have any boundaries, right? We're not respecting what it is that we need, and we're trying to be all things for all the people. Here's what's happening. Inside of that, you're not standing in your worth because you're dependent on outside validation to feel enough, right? You're wanting to be liked versus holding firm boundaries about your time, your value, your services, what it is that you need, right? So instead of going to the gym or getting the exercise that you really wanted, or instead of doing the meditation practice that you had on your agenda, instead you're, up at the crack of dawn, gift wrapping the thing for, somebody else, right? So what's happening is that by not holding firm to those boundaries, you end up burning yourself out, right? And most of the time it ends up in frustration and exhaustion. So notice this, if this is something that that's happening for you. Okay, the second signal that you may be not standing in your worth and your wholeness and your enoughness is when your voice feels stifled, or like you can't really speak your truth, or you can't really say what it is that you actually want and desire without feeling some sort of guilt or shame around it, or feeling like maybe you can't speak up at a meeting and offer your opinion, or your partner asks, where do you want to go to dinner? And you say, oh, you choose, right? Instead of actually just saying what it is that you want. Maybe you hem and haw about small decisions, or you try to negotiate with the universe, right? Well, if I get this, then I'll give up that, right? You don't really stand in the full belief. And I'm holding onto my throat chakra here because a lot of times this is where things get stuck for women, is that we don't actually voice what it is that we want. We don't claim what it is that we desire. And this is so classic, you guys. I will tell you that every time a new class comes into my Money Mastery Academy, the lack of clarity about what women want is always amazing to me, but it's the same every time. Because it's like we don't allow ourselves to really ask for what we want, because we don't believe it's safe to claim what it is that we desire, right? And here's what I want to say to you. If you feel like you have to negotiate for what you want, or you feel like there's guilt or shame involved in asking for what you want, I want to remind you that it's actually safe to ask for what you want, right? It's okay. You are deserving. You are enough. You are whole. You can have what it is that you want, right? No consequences with that, right? It's safe to use your voice. It's safe to ask for help. This also shows up a lot of times that way, where we don't allow ourselves to receive the help. We don't allow ourselves to ask for it, right? To use our voice to speak out what we need. And instead we just sort of, suffer silently and do it ourselves, right? So it's safe to do that. That's the second one. The third one is this guise of operating like we've got it all under control, right? And I know that many of you know this, because here's what this looks like. On the outside, it can look like, wow, she's really organized. She's got it all together. Like everything's just happening for her, right? But on the inside, it feels like you're hustling, you're striving, you're running that race to success. Like there's just never ending amounts of stuff to do, right? And it's based on this lie that we think that by doing more, achieving more, being uber productive, being busy, we're somehow going to be more enough. Breathe that one in for a second, because all of that, again, is external, right? It's dependent on what we do to then on the outside, how much we produce, how much we can do to believe then that we are enough. I just got off a conversation about setting goals for the new year, and, one of the women feeling like, will it be enough if I don't set some big money goal? And, can I set this other goal instead? And reminding her again that she's already enough the way that she is, right? She was born enough, right? And as long as she feels really invested and excited about her goal, then it's enough, right? Whatever the dollar amount is. Oftentimes we don't notice that we're in this sort of like white knuckle death grip of life, just like hustling and like making it all happen, until we actually tune into our bodies. And so our bodies are amazing. I once had a teacher tell me that, our bodies are the doorway to transformation. And often if we don't like pay attention to what's happening, our bodies will create something, usually in the form of like some sort of health crisis, to like wake us up, to remind us that like we're not actually operating out of our highest self and out of our highest capacity, right? We're hustling, striving, right? Trying to like force it, make it all happen over effort, right? And we'll often feel that because our, shoulders get tense, our body feels tense, maybe you get headaches, your neck is tight, like something's aching, right? So tune in, right? Are you in a space of relaxed ease, and are you embracing that energy, or are you like having, this tight feeling, restricted feeling of controlling it all, right? That's a really good indicator that there might actually be some work to do, so that you can believe that it can come to you with more ease and flow, right? And that you don't have to strive so hard to be enough. Okay. The fourth one that I want to talk about is imposter syndrome, and I've talked about this before. So here's what I want to say about that. Like, you're not a fake, right? We often feel like we don't have the skills when we're up to new things, or if we're, especially if you're starting a new business, or you're putting in a new revenue wheel, or, adding a different product or complementary service to your business. And maybe it's something that you haven't done before. Maybe then there's sort of this feeling, or maybe you're leading a big team, or doing a keynote speaking presentation, or you're a first-time author, or whatever it is for you, right? Or you've taken on a new role in an organization, and you've become the CEO. Before, you were a VP of, whatever, right? All of these things can bring up that feeling of like, oh, do I have what it takes, right? Am I enough? And that's the lie, right? That's the lie. That's the lie that tells us, that makes us think that somehow we're not enough. And again, it's really natural in any kind of new circumstance to have that kind of self-doubt, to have that kind of fear, right? So recognizing that when your body gets into that sympathetic state and that nervous system state of like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing here, that we can actually observe that gently and remind ourselves that we do know, that we are not imposters, we are not fakes, we are not frauds. We have tons of experience that we have gained through life and all the other things that we have done. And yes, some things may be new, but we can still bring all of that past wisdom with us into our new experiences, right? So that's another one. Check in if that resonates, because oftentimes that comes up when we have worth work to do. So here's the truth. You are totally worthy. And I want to just talk about, where all these lies come from, and where do they build, and how do we, how did these get implanted in the first place? Because there's a few different places and sort of sources of this. And I've talked about this before. One is just sort of the experiences in the family life, right? The people who are influential around us, what gets embedded into our subconscious, right? The things that we were taught, the patterns that we witnessed, the experiences that we've had, maybe even some of the traumatic events, that were significant that we've been through, that have, created even, have created powerful memories and even, powerful experiences in our body, right? And it's not so much even just those experiences, but it's what we have chosen to think about them. And this is an important distinction. So for example, if your parents got divorced when you were young, you may have made up a story that if you were more lovable or a better kid, then they would have stayed together, right? That's the story, right? That says somehow you weren't good enough, and so that thing happened, right? Or a relationship splits apart and you think, oh, that's all about me, right? So that would be an example of something like that. The other piece is the collective consciousness, right? It's just sort of floating around in the world and that we work with, right? That we're not we're not good enough somehow. Yes. And we choose, right? We get to choose. Someone is saying that we get to choose. Yes. And these are all things that we chose to believe in, right? And so we have to make different choices now. That's what a lot of this worth work is about. Inside of the collective consciousness, there's just a huge belief that it has to be hard, right? That we have to prove our worth, that, things are somehow not good enough, that we're not good enough until we do X, Y, Z, right? That comparison trap, all of that is part of where these lies stem from. So one of the things that I see women doing a lot, and I think this is the how behind all of this is really getting ourselves out of this worth negotiation trap. And, how do we help ourselves start to embrace our worth, right? To not buy into these lies and these stories. So I want to talk about that briefly, and I want to just do this in a couple minutes here, but here's what happens. We make our worth, and I've talked about this already in terms of the 4, indicators that we might need to do some of this work, right? When we make things about anything or anyone or, everyone that's outside of us, when we make our worth dependent on those things, when we tie our validation and our enoughness and to that, external thing, right? When we take things personally, that's when we start to negotiate our worth, right? That's when we are buying into this trap. So here's what this looks like. A relationship ends and you think that, it's all about you, right? That's a really good example of that. Yes, worth negotiation. No one defines us but us. Yeah, we have to define our worth for ourselves, right? We have to stand in full conviction and abundance that, we are worthy, right? Just by being born, right? But when we put our worth on the table to be negotiated by everybody else, right? And being dependent on external circumstances or what other people do or don't do, or do they approve of us or not approve of us, or what decisions are they making or not making, right? Then we have effectively laid our worth on the table to be negotiated, right? And that has to stop. That's crap, right? That makes no sense at all. And so, right, here's what it looks like. And I hear it a lot inside of my client conversations. And so I want to give you a couple examples. An example that I heard the other day was, I lost a client and I ended a program, and then somebody told me, some sort of excuse. And I internalized that to mean that I wasn't a good coach and maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore, right? That's something that I've heard directly from one of my clients, right? So if you lose a client, if you lose an employee, if you lose a customer, and then you take it personally and you think, maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore, that's negotiating for your worth, right? If a customer doesn't sign up for your program and you take it personally and you think, why should I bother? Like, that's that. If your kids act out and, maybe they're sassy about something or they don't respond the way that you want them to, and then you think, I'm not a good mother, right? That's negotiating for your worth, right? And all of that has to stop. So this is what those examples demonstrate for us, is this not enoughness programming that has been ingrained inside of us. And this is what drives this lack of self-worth. It's what perpetuates and affirms the lie that, we are not worthy, right? And that's how all of this works, right? We go deep into this inside of my Money Mastery Academy by really peeling back all of the layers and looking at all the ways that, we externalize and look for that external validation. We make our worth conditional, right? And it applies not just to worth, but lots of other things. And I want to tell you that although it sounds heavy, we do it in a way that's really light and loving and can actually be, really uplifting because we can look at it from a lighter lens and then, make different decisions, right? Make different choices, because that's what this work is. So to wrap this up, I want to just invite you to ask any questions that you guys have, to put them into the comments. And I want you to just, put your hands on your heart. I want you to take a deep breath in, and I want you to remember the truth of your abundance. I want you to remember that you are worthy and enough and whole when you were born, right? This is your abundant birthright, right? This is your abundant truth that you are worthy just by being, and there's nothing that you have to do or prove or say or create in order to prove or earn or deserve that, that worth or that enoughness or that wholeness, right? You are worthy just by being.